Debatę. Kolejnym punktem porządku dziennego.
The next item on the agenda are the statements of the Council and the Commission, the program of activities of the Hungarian Presidency of the Council. The rotating presidency is changing right now, and Hungary is in presidency for the first time in history. It is always a very important event for the European Union. During Belgian presidency, we developed new forms of cooperating with the Council and the Presidency. We had meetings at the level of administration, committees, ministers, and the meetings at the level of the Presidency and the President of the European Parliament. We shall continue these forms of cooperation also under the Hungarian Presidency. We have already agreed this with Prime Minister Orbán. Today we are going to talk about the program of the Hungarian Presidency. Let me welcome Prime Minister Orbán at the European Parliament. We are happy to see that we will have an opportunity to discuss in detail a number of issues which are important for the cooperation.
Minister Viktor Orbán.
Mélyen tisztelt
Honourable members, I'm delighted that you have turned out in such numbers.
We understand the demonstration. You show what is necessary to show. Please leave it now. We must continue our debate. Please, colleagues. Thank you. Mr. Prime Minister, if you could start, please.
As I was saying, Honourable President, I'm delighted that at the meetings of the European Parliament we see performances and liveliness, and that means it's no different from the meetings of the Hungarian Parliament. So I feel like I'm at home. So thank you for having invited me along this morning, and I'd like to greet the members of Parliament, President Barroso, and my friend from the region, the President of the European Parliament as well. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all I'd like to make it quite clear that it is a great honour for me to be able to address you this morning in my capacity as President in Office of the European Union. Obviously, this is a routine event for you because every 6 months a Prime Minister comes to visit you and presents you with the programme of the Presidency in office. However, from the perspective of us as Hungarians, this is far more important than just pure routine. This is a historical event that we can be here. As you know, after the Second World War, Hungary sacrificed the greatest amount of blood and the greatest amount of human lives for freedom and democracy. And you know that is true in 1956 and in the course of the reprisals that followed 1956. We were the first ones who were involved in toppling the communist regime. We were the first ones who took up arms against the Soviet Empire, and we proved to the world that communist doctrine is not a harmless ideology, but a very dangerous threat to Western civilization.
Kiütöttük az első téglát.
We were the first ones to knock a break out of the wall of communism, and this was something which led to the downfall of communism. So, ladies and gentlemen, I feel that we can say with full justification that we've done a lot. We've made a big contribution to Europe once again becoming united, and this is why this is a historical occasion today that I can come and address you in my capacity as Prime Minister of Hungary and President in Office of the Council. Let me assure you that we will be following in the footsteps of the 1956 freedom fighters. We will be following their example when it comes to a united Europe. Honourable members, we in Central Europe, and that includes us as Hungarians, have always been a part of a united Europe, and we've always been interested in that, and we continue to be interested in that. However, to create a unified Europe and to preserve a unified Europe, you must show strength. 20 years ago, Europe did have enough strength to overcome its divisions and partitioning and become united, and it was a historical moment for Europe to become reunited, an opportunity we had to seize, and this is why we have as our slogan for the Hungarian presidency, Strong Europe. Honourable members, today we are faced with an equally serious challenge to the one we faced 20 years ago. So perhaps it's no exaggeration for us to say that we are confronted perhaps in the European Union with the hardest year of the last 2 decades. Once again, we're seeing storm clouds gathering on the horizon, and we're seeing the world economy being riven by divisions, and we have to stand our ground against that backdrop in Europe. And we know that Europe has to remain united, so we need to show strength to preserve that unity today as well. I am firmly convinced that all member states of the European Union, including my home country as well, will only be strong and successful if the European Union too is strong. If it is strong, then it will be able to come up with a response to the challenges that face us in terms of the economy, the global economy, the environment, demography and security. The only question is where can we gather our strength from? And we will get a response to that if we ask another question at the same time. What is weakening Europe today, in the here and now? What is it that is destroying the competitiveness of an entire civilization? Here, other parts of the world are not threatening us. We're not seeing a threat from a foreign ideology. Instead, we're talking about a very practical problem, which is a genuine problem for us. And in fact, in English, you talk about debt. And it's a very simple word that carries a lot of weight and a lot of connotations. We're being devoured by debt, and we've got a new world and new competition, and the Western world, including Europe, has got a huge set of risks to contend with. The Hungarian presidency is firmly convinced that there's only one way to overcome debt, and that is by work. We Hungarians are more than familiar with this, because the problems that we are confronted with in our economy back home is because we have the lowest employment rate in the whole of the European Union, and I'm embarrassed to say so. Our rate of employment is 55% at the moment. However, if you don't have work, if there are no jobs for people, then there's no money, and then you get indebted and you have to take out loans. So if you look at today's mentality, we have to look ahead towards the future and respect the need for work. We have to espouse that, because it has made our civilization strong. We have a European Code of Conduct which has been one of the cornerstones of what we've been doing, and it is a cornerstone of prudent economic behaviour. We can't live beyond our means. We can't spend more money than we are capable of producing, and we can't burden down our children and grandchildren with debt because of our behaviour. I am convinced that respect for work is a concept which has many facets, and it will only help us to make progress if we have worked for that. If we get everything beforehand, if we're given everything on a plate, which ought to have been the fruits of many years of labour, then we start asking questions about the point of working in the first place. And then we have to look at servicing debts. And basically, our whole attitude towards and stance towards work will change. Now, this is a crisis that every last one of us is confronted with and faces. Of course, we need to carry out a diagnosis of the state of the economy. I think everybody agrees on this. I think for us, as politicians in Europe, it looks like an illness, and we need to come up with therapy and agreeing on the most appropriate therapy is something which is an object of debate. But this is a highly urgent issue. I don't think we have much time left over for debate, particularly not for debate about whether certain individual unusual or innovative therapies, simply because they're new, innovative and unusual, should be rejected as a result. We need to show courage in our national governments and our national parliaments. We have to overcome the economic crisis, and I am convinced that Europe's citizens are expecting jobs, growth and security from us, and this is why centre stage has been given in our Hungarian presidency programme, and you can find a summary in this little book that I am holding up to you now, that in the centre focal point of what we're doing, creating jobs, is in the forefront. And as I said, the economy and looking at how to sort out the problems confronted by the economy are the focal point of our forthcoming activities. I think that the course that has been set out for us to follow by the Council is fair enough. It's correct. But we need to put in further efforts. We need to look at modifying the treaty, and we have to create the legal framework for the current provisional crisis mechanisms to be, from 2013 onwards, made into a permanent crisis mechanism, and we will do everything in our power to ensure that that goal can be attained. And we need to look at economic coordination being bolstered. We also need to try to promote economic growth, and we need to look at sustainable economies based on jobs. And one of the most prominent aims of the presidency, and I would urge you to cooperate with us in achieving this, is for the 6 pieces of legislation about economic coordination could be adopted, and I would urge you to cooperate with us on moving towards that. We are a parliament-friendly presidency, and we will definitely continue to be a parliament-friendly presidency. So please help us out in getting these 6 pieces of legislation off the ground and implemented as soon as possible. The Hungarian presidency is equally convinced that we have to more consistently implement and more closely coordinate the reforms which are necessary in member states. As you know, the European semester has been launched. It's not just a new feature for us as Hungarians, but for all of us, and it's part and parcel, an integral part of the European Union's programme. And if we're talking about macroeconomic growth, the semester has got off the ground. And I'd like to congratulate President Barroso for the excellent document which he has drawn up, which is very suited to enable us to take the first preliminary steps here. So we have to look at the foundations of our presidency, and those foundations will be the debates held in Council. Ladies and gentlemen, obviously we need to have international credibility if we want to recommend a common economic policy in Europe. So I would like to inform you that we do have a good chance, because as you know, my country was very often in Dunce's corner in Europe because of its excessive debt, and we're doing everything that we can to get out of that situation. And in 2011 our public debt will be less than 3%, and we will be one of 2 member states of the European Union in which in 2011 state debt will be reduced. And I think that this is absolutely indispensable in terms of the credibility of our presidency's programme on the economy. Honourable members, as far as the Hungarian presidency is concerned, it is extremely important that we should strengthen the single market. Now, when we talk about strengthening the single market, that is one of the possible sources of economic growth. Now, we have to get rid of the obstacles that continue to be strewn in our path, and we want to expand our cooperation into the realm of digitalisation as well, so we want to expand it into new areas. We also need to try to create a climate that is friendly for business. Now, looking at energy policy and innovation, we're going to have a debate on that at the summit on the 4th of February. I'd like to tell you that according to the way we see things, it will be very important that the existing rules in the energy sector are dealt with in such a way that we continue to remove obstacles in their path, and we need to create the missing infrastructure so that we can have a genuine, real energy policy coming into being in Europe. Another very important aim of the Hungarian presidency is that we should have diversified sources of energy. And we are on the brink of a breakthrough in terms of European energy policy. Member States have reached agreement. We've got the Slovak-Hungarian agreement that we're going to sign up to next week, which will mean that from the Baltic Sea to the Adriatic and to the Black Sea, we've got the north-south gas distribution system put in place. So we're going to have a full interconnector brought into being. And in the east, we thought in terms of the east and the west in the past, but now we need to look at the north to the south. And I think that we've got very promising measures in the pipeline. Now, if Europe doesn't have a heart, it might very well be intelligent, but its intelligence will be in vain without a heart. Now, you know that we have to look at the most vulnerable groups in society and create the conditions for them to be fully integrated. Now, here, this is not a question of debating the Roma strategy. So, as I said, it's not the time to discuss the Roma strategy, but I'm just talking to you in my capacity as the leader of one country, and we're all playing with fire. And if we don't succeed in coming up with a Roma strategy at European level, the integrated communities of Roma in Europe will opt for a nomadic lifestyle in Europe, and this is something which will mean that the problem will be shifted to other countries in Europe. And here I know that the Roma issue has been dealt with in the national framework and is a national something which national powers deal with on a sovereign basis, but by the end of the Hungarian presidency in June we hope to succeed in adopting a common European Roma strategy. Honourable members, I have to touch upon the issue of enlargement as well, in spite of the fact that I too can see that there is a fear of enlargement. People are getting cold feet about enlargement in Europe. Now, you know, we won't be able to overcome our own internal concerns if we don't get to grips with this, because there will be obstacles to further rounds of enlargement if we don't get to grips with our problems. But I would like to introduce a note of optimism in relation to enlargement. I know that there's a lot of work on our plates ahead of us, because here we need to look about integrating nations into the European Union, but I would say that it would be unfair if a country such as Croatia, which over the last few years has actually performed better than Hungary, which is already a member state of the EU, that if Croatia continues to remain outside of the EU and is not allowed in to become a member of the EU. So we want to take the negotiations as far as signing the agreement. Now here we also need to look at expanding the Schengen area, including Romania and Bulgaria in the Schengen area. Now I know exactly that there are 6 other countries that are waiting in the wings and that they're very well advanced in their stages of preparation. I'm going to always stand up for Bulgaria and Romania to be allowed to join the Schengen area as quickly as possible. Honourable members, another feature of the Hungarian presidency programme is the Danube strategy, and I'm convinced that the European Union will have to continue to play a leadership role in terms of combating climate change at global level. So I would like one of the results of the December Cancun summit to be that we'll be able to continue to pursue the negotiations in such a way that we will have legally binding decisions taken by the end of 2011. Honourable members, I can see that I'm verging on being discourteous with the amount of your time that I'm taking up, but let me say a few words nevertheless about demography and family policy. I would like an I don't want to provoke an interinstitutional debate, but we in Hungary would like to adopt a clear-cut stance about freedom of religion, and we want to take action against the persecution of Christians. Honourable members, by way of conclusion, I'd like to tell you that we are fully aware of the fact that every last one of us is a politician. Everybody sitting or standing in this plenary chamber is a politician. We have our own points of view, we have our own principles, we have our own comrades, and we have our own interests too. I am taking all of this into account, but having done so, I would like to turn to you and say that you might have your own opinions about Hungarian domestic politics, but don't mix up criticisms of Hungarian domestic politics and actions about Hungarian domestic politics with the 6 months of the Hungarian presidency that lie ahead. Because if you mix up the two, obviously I'm ready to fight. But, you know, here, what you have to realise is that it won't just be detrimental or damaging to Hungary alone, but detrimental and damaging to the EU as a whole. Now, given the fact that such difficult tasks lie ahead, I would ask you to draw this distinction insofar as it is at all possible for you to do so. Now, as you know, we've had a debate and we've got a spirit of reasonableness in Hungary, and you know the media law has been subject to criticism, and we're very happy to see that the European Union's institutions are going to be looking at it, and we're happy to engage in consultation, and if any objections can be established and verified, we would be only too happy to amend the law. This is not a question of prestige, it's not a question of vanity, it's not a question of arm wrestling, and let me say in parentheses that if you want to fight for freedom in Europe, you can always count on the Hungarian government in the future to fight for freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, we know that Europe is faced with a very difficult 6 months. A very difficult 6 months lie ahead of us, but I'm convinced that we can get to grips with these problems. After the Second World War, Europe, in spite of the hatreds and in spite of the piles of rubble that surrounded it, was able to pull itself together and work together. And in fact, you know that in 1989 we were capable of reuniting Europe. So I think that we can look ahead to coping with and coming up with adequate responses to future historical challenges of the same ilk. After the Hungarian presidency as well, we will need more than just ambitious plans. We need to look at the huge pile of files piling up on our desks, and in fact we need to look at the tasks that lie ahead beyond just a time frame of 6 months or a year and a half. We need to look at our common objectives and our common values being interlinked, because we can only found common aims on shared values. Now, we are going to carry out our day-to-day work in the presidency whilst looking ahead to these ambitious aims, and here you can count on our complete humility and respect in carrying out our work. Thank you.
Mr. Prime Minister, for your speech and presentation. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for the presentation of the programme of the Hungarian presidency. On behalf of the European Commission, the President, José Manuel Barroso. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister, distinguished members of the Hungarian government, distinguished members of the European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. The start of 2011 is a historic moment for Hungary, as it takes over the helm of the Council of the European Union for the first time. But it is also a critical moment for the European Union as a whole, so the Hungarian presidency comes at a time that demands a special sense of responsibility regarding the tasks ahead for Europe. It is particularly appropriate that the Hungarian presidency has chosen as its motto "Strong Europe", and Europe is at its strongest and most effective when we are united, when we act in a coordinated manner with strong institutions, when we show a common resolve to steer a course through these stormy waters, when we show that by working together we are capable of finding solutions to the most pressing problems. This is important to remember because we are not out of the woods yet. There can be no backtracking, no return to business as usual. We must implement our reforms without delay and develop the innovative policies needed to make the Europe 2020 vision a reality. So I look forward to working in partnership with Prime Minister Orbán and with the Hungarian Presidency to make sure that it is a successful one. Let me tell Prime Minister Orbán here and now that he can count on the Commission's full support on this. At the same time, the Commission hopes very much that it can count on the Hungarian Presidency support. A fruitful partnership is particularly important in the areas of financial services, economic governance, the implementation of the Europe 2020 strategy, energy and internal market. So I am pleased that the Presidency's priorities fully reflect this. A strong partnership with the European Parliament is also essential, as in some cases fast tracking of proposals will be important. For example, we must have the new tools for reinforced economic governance at our disposal as soon as possible. There is a clear target set by the European Council to deliver by June 2011. The rhythm of work already set by the Hungarian Presidency and the comments we just heard from the Prime Minister are encouraging in this respect. As we start this new Presidency, a comprehensive EU agenda and appropriate governance tools are already in place. The European Semester, Europe 2020 strategy and its flagship initiatives, and the Single Market Act. All these key initiatives have been discussed and endorsed by the EU institutions. But of course we need to do more, and it is also now time to act decisively to implement a comprehensive programme. The European Semester is at the heart of the reformed economic strategy of the European Union. Its proper implementation will be a major task in the months ahead. The Commission kick started the semester by adopting the annual growth survey last week. Following discussions in several Council formations, the process will culminate at the European Council in March, which will provide essential policy guidance for Member States to be reflected in their stability and convergence programmes, as well as their national reform programmes, both of which we are expecting in April. Since we have already discussed this in the previous debate, I will not go into details, but of course the priorities, you know them, are macroeconomic stability, namely fiscal consolidation, structural reform and, of course, front load economic growth, employment being, of course, our most important concern. Final agreement on the European Crisis Management Resolution Mechanism will also be a key deliverable during the Hungarian Presidency. The Hungarian Presidency will also have an important role to play in shepherding through our efforts to relaunch the single market. Following the public consultation launched by the Commission on the Single Market Act, the EU institutions will be asked to agree on a definitive action plan to be realised by the end of 2012. Energy will also be an important area in the coming months and already now in the 4 February European Council. The Commission has already put a series of important energy initiatives on the table, which will feed into the February European Council. These include the Energy Agenda 2020, our communication on energy infrastructure priorities. We will soon be adopting the Resource Efficient Europe flagship, in which energy also features highly. The Commission intends to develop its work around the following 5 axes: a strong energy policy as a key to competitiveness, sustainable growth and energy security, the internal market in energy as an asset, building the European Union's new energy infrastructure, making decisive progress on energy efficiency, and developing an effective and united EU approach to external energy policy. Support from the Presidency and the European Parliament will also be essential to ensure an agreement on the European Union patent. As requested by several Member States, the Commission adopted a proposal for enhanced cooperation in this field on 14 December. The Commission appreciates Hungary's commitment to take forward work on the EU patent under its Presidency. Negotiations with Croatia are now in the final phase. Conclusion of negotiations under the Hungarian Presidency is an ambitious goal, especially considering the remaining requirements Croatia still needs to fulfil. This will require an all out push on Croatia's side. I welcome the fact that the Hungarian Presidency considers the social and economic integration of Roma as one of its priorities. The Commission set up a Roma task force to analyse the use and effectiveness of EU and national funds in all Member States for Roma inclusion. Building on this work, the Commission will present a European Union framework for national Roma integration strategies in April. The new Presidency will also put the spotlight on our Danube strategy. The Danube region has great potential which has not yet been properly exploited due to ineffective cooperation. The aim is to develop a more coordinated approach to bring European added value to this region. The Commission welcomes the Presidency's commitment to this strategy. Hungary already contributed significantly to its preparation, including policy papers and hosting a conference in Budapest, which I had the pleasure of attending. Now it will be in charge of shepherding it through the Council and launching this Danube strategy implementation. Finally, the debate on cohesion policy will intensify in the coming months. The Commission welcomes the intention of the Presidency to discuss the proposals of the fifth cohesion report. We will present legislative proposals for the future cohesion policy this summer, following proposals on the next financial framework. The fifth cohesion forum at the end of January in Brussels will allow for a major stakeholder discussion, and it is encouraging that Prime Minister Orbán himself will participate. Effectiveness and European added value must be the driving principles of the reform. The Commission is convinced that cohesion policy needs to underpin more strongly the policy priorities and reform agenda of Europe 2020. I count on the support of the Presidency in this work. It is our common interest and responsibility to make funding more effective. Only this way can we defend an ambitious budget for cohesion policy. And finally, since I know this is a matter of political concern, let me add a final comment on Hungary's media law. The principle of freedom of the press is a sacred one in the European Union. I stated it in Brussels and in Budapest when I had the honour to be received by Prime Minister Orbán. The Commission has looked at the law and still this week will write to the Hungarian authorities to seek clarification on certain aspects that could create legal problems and that have raised some concerns. On the basis of the Hungarian authorities' answers, we will assess the situation further. The Prime Minister has already made quite clear that adjustments will be made should the Commission, after this legal assessment, decide that changes need to be made. Prime Minister Orbán just said that he is a politician. I am sure he is indeed a very committed politician. And so I think he can agree that aside from the legal issues, which will be dealt with in an objective and impartial manner, because we will treat Hungary exactly as any other Member State, we must also concern ourselves with the political aspects. And Hungary, like any Member State taking on the rotating presidency, needs to have the full backing of all the other Member States and European institutions to make the presidency a success. I hope that Prime Minister Orbán will take this into consideration. I have no doubt that this presidency must be a success, coming at such a critical time for the European Union. So let us allow the proper procedures to take their course, and at the same time let us give our full support to Hungary as it takes on this heavy responsibility. Let me tell you, distinguished members of this Parliament, I was recently in Hungary and I have been receiving messages from young people from Hungary saying that they are proud that their country, for the first time, has this responsibility of leading the Council of the European Union. Let us make Hungary closer to Europe and Europe closer to Hungary. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a lot to do. The Hungarian Presidency can count on every assistance from the European Commission in pushing its priorities forward, because it is only by achieving these goals together that we will build a strong Europe, a Europe which delivers growth and jobs, which preserves and reaffirms our values, namely the sacred values of freedom and justice, and which positions our societies to thrive in a changing world. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for your speech. On behalf of the European People's Party, Mr. President Joseph Daul.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President, President of the Council, Mr. Viktor Orban, President of the Commission, Mr. José Manuel, colleagues. The presidency of the Council of Ministers has a lot of challenges to pick up. The euro that we have to stabilise, the challenge of employment that requires greater growth and therefore by a better economy, a challenge in terms of energy and food security when the prices of raw materials are rising astronomically. And I have no doubt that in terms of the Commission, Parliament and the Council, the Hungarian President will be able to pick up these challenges. Mr. President of the Council, you have gained the confidence of your electors in Hungary, and you base your philosophy on an ideal, a value, that of freedom and democracy. Since your election, you have undertaken with the Hungarian Parliament a number of reforms that your people has approved of by giving you a large majority democratically. Today, one of these reforms, that concerns the media, is a subject of a legal analysis on the part of the European Commission, the guardian of the treaty. And you yourself last week declared during your talks with President Barroso and since, and for this I thank you, that if there is in this law any incompatibility with European legislation, you will submit the necessary changes to your Parliament. And I believe in your word. As far as I'm concerned, I trust in the European Commission, like you, that it will play its role as guardian of the treaty. And I also have confidence in you that you will respect the letter and the spirit of the European rules. Mr. Viktor Orban, I've known you for a long time, and I consider you as a very great European. As far as I'm concerned, I have no reason to doubt that you will do what you have said about the law on the media as on the other priorities of your presidency. And I now come to these priorities, beginning with the first, which is the stability of the euro. It is perhaps a good thing that the two presidencies of the Council that will follow on in 2011 will be taken on by the countries that don't belong to the euro but who are thinking of coming in very quickly. Both Hungary and Poland could come in and have every interest in ensuring the stability of this currency. And I will reiterate that the only efficient way of putting an end to the speculative attack on the euro is to strengthen the fundamentals of the European currency by putting our public finance back on a proper footing, by producing a greater coordination of the fiscal and social policies of our countries, as is provided for in the new presidency. This will require greater flexibility on the part of our labour market and by greater productivity. As the Hungarian presidency of the Council has said, the EPP believes that the future of the Europeans requires a stronger and more consistent Europe. And it doesn't require more Europe, but certainly not less Europe. President of the Council, we need European economic governance. We need more community spirit, and I know that you will work in this sense. President of the Council, you have defined as one of your greatest priorities the setting up of a common energy policy. I believe you're right, and our President also has considered that this was one of the strong points of his presidency. I endorse this, but I'd also alert you to the very worrying consequences of a rise in raw materials that has occurred in the last few months. We have seen what has happened in various Mediterranean countries, of the social implications of such a rise in basic commodities, particularly for the poorer countries. I hope that Europe will take its problem seriously and will attack those that engage in speculation. I also I hope also that the Hungarian presidency, I thought that the Greens had opened their mouths. They need to keep this till the end. I hope also that the Hungarian presidency will support the Commission in its assistance to Tunisia, that is living through important times, and that should be insisted in its change. Mr. President of the Council, You know that in order to succeed in your mandate, in order to assist Europe through the difficult times it's living, that you need the confidence of the European Parliament. And you have shown during the month of December, when we were in a difficult situation in Council, you had the courage to sign the famous letter that assisted Parliament to vote for its budget. Thank you in advance, and thank you for what you've done in the month of December. Since January, you've considered political groups as one of your priorities. You've chosen Nicola Gurri, who is a former communist colleague of European affairs, and these are positive signs that I'm sure will be accompanied by a perfect balancing of the reforms that you undertake and the European values that we all defend together. Thank you.
And for your speech. Thank you for your speech. Mr. President Martin Schulz, on behalf of Socialists and Democrats.
Thank you very much, President. I think we have a serious situation here. We are here together in a serious hour. The hour is grave. First of all, Mr. Orban, yes, you are known to the people of Europe as a fighter against the communist regime for the freedom of your country, and we respect that. Yesterday afternoon we could have been speaking about a different man, one that the Hungarians could have been proud of as well. It was yourself, the Prime Minister of your country, and a Foreign Minister as well, who cooperated with Mr. Mock to draw the split Austro-Hungarian Empire between Austria and Hungary, and that made the reunification of Germany possible, and we would have liked to see that a greater Hungary, which could have happened then. Now, your answers and those of the President, Commission and of Council in fact recognise something. If your Media Act is not compatible with European standards, you're willing to change it. That is a good thing. But that is also an acknowledgement of the fact that this is not an internal Hungarian political debate, it's a European debate, because it's clear that this act is all about the European Union and its fundamental values and the fact that it is a community of law. Let me mention three fundamental aspects of it. It sets up a media council that is supposed to make sure that only balanced reporting takes place in the media. It has to be balanced. It's a legal requirement. You have a two-thirds majority in Parliament. That's perfectly legitimate. And with that, you have organised the Media Council that it contains only members of your party and the government or people close to them. So it is unilateral, and it is charged with determining what is balanced reporting and what isn't. Now that is not in line with the rule of law as we understand it in Europe, the European community of law. In a democracy, Mr. Orban, it is the media that scrutinise power. What you're doing is the power, the government, that is scrutinising the media, and that's not right. We, as Europeans, that are concerned about it, and that is why. Look, you are right to point out that we have a lot of problems to resolve. We've had a big financial market crisis. We still have. We have to resolve our budget issues. Another problem, the rising prices of foodstuffs, especially in the regions close to us, our neighbouring regions, are another problem we have to tackle. And it's a problem here in Europe as well, and these are all problems we have to tackle soon. We have to think about employment in our countries, and when I read your programme, I see there's an awful lot of things in there that we can certainly cooperate on. And there you are a true representative of the European People's Party. Just like the President of France, when he was President of Council, he spoke as a man of the left here, but he acted as a man of the right back home in France. Now, if you're going to do things the way you say you are, that is a good thing, and that is why I believe that we must judge you on your implementation of the programme you have announced, and we will. You've said that you have a big majority back home in Hungary, and that's a good thing. Many governments involving your party too, we would we would have nothing to do but to call home and ask if you're still around. But you've got a two-thirds majority, and that's great. It gives you time, sure, but it also gives you an obligation, a duty that you must strengthen Hungary with your two-thirds majority, but that strengthened Hungary must also strengthen the European Union. So I want to ask you this. In the council buildings in Brussels, they roll out a carpet for you, a red carpet. You're an honoured guest. And on that carpet they have the borders of Hungary as they were in 1840. What kind of message is that for Europe? I've seen symbols like that used in the past, and let me tell me what Nietzsche said, the German philosopher, back in the 19th century. A great victory is a great danger. Human nature doesn't like that kind of great victory, and sometimes they tend to want to reduce it and to live with it in such a way that it turns into a great defeat. So I'd like to point out to you that a big majority brings with it great responsibility and duties, and I'm saying this to the President in Office of Council of the European Union, not you as Prime Minister, and in that capacity as President in Office of Council, you have to do everything you can to show that you are willing at all times to defend the democratic values that underpin Europe, and to refuse any partisan action. Waiting for the Commission to check that, to test that. In Austria, for example, we have a ban on through traffic of large trucks, and when they did that, we took action against Austria. Now we see a basic democratic value of the European society, the European Union, being threatened, and we're not doing anything. So please make sure that you check it, you test it, and that we get the results very soon. We don't want this debate to dominate the Hungarian presidency. We want your presidency to be a successful one. We don't want it to be blocked by this. So please do something about it. Withdraw your act and come back with a better one, a new one, a balanced media act in Hungary. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of Liberals and Democrats, Mr. President Guy Verhofstadt, the floor is yours.
Yes, Mr. President. First of all, let me be very clear that to Mr. Orbán that my group, Mr. Prime Minister, supports the priorities of the Hungarian presidency. I think that, as you, we believe also in a strong Europe. So we fully backing you in your priorities for this presidency. And I think that in this 6 months, under this presidency, you have one top priority. One top priority, and that is to establish, I think, the fastest as possible, a real economic governance inside the European Union and inside the Eurozone. Because let us be clear, 2010 was not an example, a good example for the Euro and for the European Union. We were always running behind the facts, after the events. And what we need now, the fastest as possible, under your leadership and the leadership of the President of the Commission, is a global package on economic governance, a real economic and fiscal union, because it is nonsense to have a monetary union and not at the same time an economic and fiscal union. And what I am asking to you is not to invent new ideas, but is simple, to take the package of last week of the President of the Commission and of Commissioner Olli Rehn, and to put this package with his 4 cornerstones on the table of the Council and on the table of your colleagues. I miss only, Mr. Orbán and Mr. Barroso, one element, one cornerstone in this package. Nowhere in the world there exists a currency without one bond market behind it. In Europe we have still 27 bond markets, 27 speculations and 27 spreads. In the Eurozone we have still 17 bond markets, 70 spreads and 17 speculations. What the markets are doing for the moment is not speculating against the euro, but speculating on the difference inside the euro. And the only way to tackle that is to have a genuine bond market in Europe of 4,000, 5,000 billion euro that can be compared with what exists in other parts of the world, with a special treatment for the AAA countries in any way. Finally, Mr. Orban, I want to say something about the elephant in the room, I should say. And what is the elephant in this beautiful room here? It's naturally the media law in Hungary. And be sure, I will not talk about the law itself. I will rather use the example of one of my favourite writers, a great Hungarian writer, Sándor Márai. I think that with the language policy of the former Slovak government and with the current media law in Hungary, I doubt that Márai would ever have existed. Why? Well, Márai, dear colleagues, he lived in Kassa, what is today, as we know, Košice. And he wrote in Hungarian, which was until recently, as you know, a problem in Slovakia. And also important, he was a journalist, which is becoming a problem tomorrow. Because with the new legislation, which is obliging, in fact, Mr. Orban, the media to provide proper information and adequate information about public life, I think that Márai and his books would never have existed. The Confessions of a Citizen, his masterpiece, I can tell you, is quite improper and in many respects totally inadequate, but it is a masterpiece of literature. And in my opinion, the aim of media governance is not to guarantee proper and adequate information. No, the aim of media governance is to uphold pluralism and to guarantee that any initiative in media can be developed. And I hope that you shall use your majority. Use your two-thirds majority. We all dream about this. All politicians are dreaming about this, I can tell you. No, not you. You're an exception.
Well, Mr. President.
Well, I hope, Mr. President, that you are using your two-thirds majority to guarantee that pluralism and that you shall change that law the fastest as possible.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. As the next speaker will be Mr. President Daniel Cohn-Bendit. The floor is yours.
Monsieur le Président.
President, just one thing to start off with, just to clarify everything. The Greens and myself, personally, we love Hungary. I shed tears in '54 when Hungary lost the World Cup. My first demo was along with my brother in '56 against a Soviet intervention in Budapest. As Guy Verhofstadt said, many intellectuals and Hungarian writers were along with us, politically and intellectually, over years, as along with Viktor Orban when he actually fought against the communists at the end of the '80s and the beginning of the '90s. I was along with Viktor Orban when he called upon the European liberals to throw out Haider from the European Liberal Party. Viktor Orban is a politician, for me, is worthy of respect. But today, Mr. Orban, you're on the path of becoming a European Chavez, a national populist, who just precisely doesn't understand the crucial nature and the structure of democracy. And one thing, it's very simple, Mr. Orban. It's very simple. There is no balanced education, do you think Mr. Nixon, or balanced information rather, do you think Mr. Nixon got balanced information and was interested in it? Or Mr. Bush on Abu Ghraib? Was that objective, his information on Abu Ghraib? Do you know any politician in France? It's impossible to get balanced information. Research, for example, into everything concerning the life of Mr. Berlusconi, that too. Do you think you get that balance? And do you think he thinks it's balanced, that information? No. I think information is to be a gadfly to politicians, quite precisely. That's the point. And that's why, Mr. Orban, your law today is not a law which corresponds with the values of the European Union. Mr. Orban, you say you want a strong Europe. A strong Europe. Again, precisely, Mr. Orban, it has to be credible. It's got to be credible, and it'll be only credible if, we'll put it the other way around. How can we be credible if we have this law discussed with Lukashenko, discussed with China? Everybody says they want balanced information, Mr. Orban. Do you understand that Europe was born in a struggle against totalitarianism, and the basis of democracy, the basis of liberty, is quite precisely freedom of expression, and that disturbs. A democracy never died through too much freedom. Democracies died through throttling freedoms, Mr. Orban. I think you knew that 20 years ago. Come back into the fold, come back to your way of thinking that you had then. I'm sure you will, and you'll understand that what I'm saying is correct. One last thing, Mr. Orban. If you want to fight for Christians in this world, we are with you. But I really had hoped that you would have welcomed the Jasmine Revolution in Tunisia today, which is the same thing, a prolongation of what you went through, getting rid of dictatorship. Well, I think you didn't address yourself to that problem, and that's wrong. For the Christians in the world, let me tell you, we're with you, and I hope, Mr. Orban, you'll be with us to fight against dictatorship in this world, in Belarus, Tunisia, Algeria, Egypt, China, Russia, wherever it is. That is our common bread, our common staple. Thank you.
And the next speech, colleague Lajos Bokros, Conservatives and Reformists.
Nem tudhatom, hogy másnak-e tájék mit jelent. Nekem szülőhazám.
Thank you. I don't know what this countryside might mean for others, but this is my mother country, and I was born there, and I hope that my body will return there. I am at home, and these are the words of Miklos Ernőti. Hungary is at home in Europe, but is the government of Hungary worthy of this presidency? It's not just about the media law, but there are 9 other elephants in this chamber. The government is trying to eliminate different oppositions and conflicts. You've got a crisis stance, you've got new measures for the poor, you've got the elimination of the budget council, you've got a piece of new legislation which bans the rules on the end of people's careers, you've got a private pensions system which it's nationalised now, like in Bolivia. These are measures then which are political measures that have been adopted. It seems that solidarity then is something that the government is working against. So we are confronted with risks, or the risk that all of these measures will distract the attention on the Hungarian presidency of Europe, and that's a terrible shame, and as a Hungarian I don't want to go through this shame, and I hope it's not too late to change. Thank you.
United Left.
Herr Präsident.
Thank you, President. Mr. President in Office of Council, I'd like to say something briefly about the Media Act. A lot of other people have spoken about it. I don't want to repeat anything. I just want to make one point. It's not interfering in Hungarian affairs, but I do think that what we recognise very late here is that the media are there to scrutinise, to control the government, the powers that be, the economy, and that's the way things should stay. And therefore, the media, those who scrutinise the media, should not be subject to scrutiny of other institutions. And with a media council like that, that could happen. That's why the media council, in terms of its membership, is not exemplary as far as we are concerned. You've explained that you're willing to change it. We made it clear that we hope that you go take that direction. Obviously, it's a Hungarian matter. There are, of course, member states that have media legislation we've been able to live with. That's just Hungary. On your intentions as President in Office of Council, or for your presidency, I'd like to say plainly that, first of all, I am pleased to see that cultural diversity is one of your main goals, the preservation of cultural diversity, and I think that's very important. I am awaiting initiatives aimed at improving the integration of minorities. You mentioned the Roma yourself. You spoke. We would like to see a European strategy for better integration of the Roma. That's very important indeed. Secondly, I'm pleased to see that you are committed to enlargement negotiations and the good neighbours policy. We have a culture, social and historic experience of Eastern Europe, and that can only be good for the European Union. The European Union, for all sorts of reasons that have often been debated here, it is still primarily a West European affair, and we are looking for a little more Eastern European input from your presidency. Thirdly, I'm looking forward anxiously to see what you are going to say about the rejigging of the agricultural and cohesion policies. My group called upon you to involve Parliament in these processes fully, and promote the small and medium-sized businesses, and to bear in mind environmental protection and food prices. Thank you very much.
Freedom and democracy.
Mr Orban, welcome. After the 6-month farce of the Belgian presidency, it's nice to see an elected Prime Minister from a proper country. And how I enjoyed your denouncement of communism as a dangerous ideology, and I noted the pride that you took in the fact that Hungary were the first country to take up arms against the Soviet Union. Well, 20 years after you won back your ability to govern yourselves democratically, you are now part of a new political union that increasingly shows similarities with that old Soviet Union. In fact, you are going to meet lots of communists over the next 6 months, including the boss of the Commission here, old Barroso, who was an advocate of Chairman Mao. You will see centralised economic planning and control, and above all what you will see is the desire to impose a political union upon the peoples of Europe without their consent. Wake up, Mr Orban. Look how they are trying to bully you this morning. They are trying to tell you how to run your own country. Tell them where to go. Stand up and fight for democracy once again.
Thank you. Non-attached, Madame Kristina Morvai.
Köszönöm szépen. Kedves kollégák!
Dear colleagues, Hungary in 1945-1956 showed to the world that oppression and lies are things you have to fight against, even if it's a desperate cause. In fact, it's our historical duty to do so. But now, in the world, we're back to square one. We have lies and the rest, and oppression. We have two pillars in the world, major capital and banks, who just privatize profits but nationalize debts. And they like nurses, the aged, pensioners and poor people to pay the bill. So politics, instead of representing people and populations, actually represents bank and major capital. And that's the case within Europe. They just say that's a natural order of things. There's no other solution. The Hungarian presidency and Hungary myself, my own country, have to show that this is not the case. They have to show that the emperor has no clothes. That philosophies and ideas just based on accrual of wealth is not. And you've got to look at the human people, not just look at what is good for profits, but what is good for people. And I wish all the best to my country, the country that loves liberty.
Ο κύριος Βόμποντα ζήτησε να παρέμβει κάνοντας χρήση του δικαιώματος της μπλε κάρτας στην κυρία Μορβάη. Δέχεστε κυρία Μορβάη μια ερώτηση από τον κύριο...
Thank you. I'm just waving the blue card. What about Mrs. Svoboda? Will you take it? Mrs. Svoboda, you can speak.
Thank you very much. Yesterday we had a brief exchange of views. I have two questions I want to put to you. It's no surprise that given your position on the right wing you support the presidency. That's another question. But are you aware that the Hungarian revolution was the work of many, many people, not just people on the right wing of politics and conservatives, as Mr. Schulz said? And have you also noticed that the criticism of the Media Act in Hungary is not just coming from the Socialists and Democrats, but from many, many people? Whether it's Georgi Conrad or others who have nothing to do with social democracy. Have you even noticed that? Thank you very much. Would you please stick to your speaking time because we have to keep going and we have the votes as well. We don't have time for addition.
Dear colleagues, if to date I thought it was worthwhile using the adjectives left and right, then I have to say that over the last 18 months it doesn't seem to make any sense at all. You are on the left and working in the interests of bankers and big capitalists. You don't care at all about what people want, people in the streets, ordinary people, and you've totally forgotten about your values. Now, you mentioned Marx, one of your predecessors, and what about what he said on justice? You never seem to recall that. You are one of the greatest oppressors of workers. That's on the one part, and then secondly, the media issue is an internal one.
Sorry to interrupt you. You've gone over 30 seconds and you really got precise and succinct. We have to continue our discussion and debate, and now that will take us to the next speakers who are written on the list. Koza for 2.5 minutes.
Tisztelt elnök asszony, tisztelt kép...
Madam President, honourable colleagues, first of all I would like to thank you for having the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Hungarian delegation of the EPP. As a person with a disability, I am more sensitive than the average person to discrimination and to all forms of double standards. This is why I have been observing with concern the political witch hunt underway in relation to the Hungarian media law. This is something we have even seen and bore witness to today in this European Parliament. The governing party, Fidesz, the Hungarian Civic Alliance, has provided evidence on countless occasions of its respect for common European values and the freedom of the press. European values means that we are committed to duties, and this is also proved by the rotating presidency. We've got, for example, energy policy, economic governance, or the strategy as regards the Roma. These are all evidence that we are working towards common values and objectives, and evidence that Europe needs to be stronger. Europe is not just a community of interest, but also a community of values. And now it's these values that you are denying. You didn't even wait for the official position of the European Commission. You're making slanderous comments and pointing the finger of blame. Perhaps the aim of these statements, or rather the aim of these statements is perhaps to jeopardize the Hungarian presidency, but you're actually jeopardizing and damaging the whole of the European Union. The European Union is facing its most grave crisis yet, so your behaviour is very irresponsible. And as a member of the Hungarian delegation of the EPP, I refute this behaviour and this form of expression. I'd also advise the Hungarian presidency to continue with its programme towards a strong Europe, and I completely support the title of the programme. We have got to work closer together now. It's more important than ever, and that's what will help us progress.
Thank you very much indeed. Mr. Tabajdi, 1.5 minutes.
Kedves képviselőtársaim, tisztelt miniszterelnök!
Thank you very much, my dear colleagues, Mr. Prime Minister. It's in the interest of the European Union, of Hungary and every Hungarian patriot, regardless of party affiliation, for the Hungarian presidency to be a success. The EU and within it the Eurozone today face extraordinary challenges. Your defining characteristic is determination, and I would like you to use your determination and your abilities in the service of Europe. As President in Office of the Council, please make a substantive contribution to making Europe more dynamic and efficient, but at the same time please respect and preserve the rules of European democracy. Unfortunately, today's debate has shown that you're having a rather turbulent start to your presidency. You can feel this distrust of your government here in Europe, the anti-democratic measures and the economic populism it has shown, the Media Act. Your tolerance of the far right are considered to be in conflict with the values of the EU in many member states, irrespective of which party is in government. The EU presidency cannot be an excuse. In fact, it's for you to show the example in respecting our fundamental values. The famous quotation of Joseph Attila, I'm angry on your behalf, not with you. And this criticism is well founded. The EU has fears for the benefit of the Hungarian government. This criticism certainly does not apply to the Hungarian people, who have made history twice in recent years. I want to live through the 6 months of this presidency with my head held high as a proud Hungarian.
Thank you, Graf Lambsdorff. 1.5 minutes. President, yesterday in a major German newspaper, saw Otto Graf Lambsdorff cited as being one of the people you most value. And I hope that in all the measures you undertake, you should look at the bases of a liberal constitutional state, therefore, and defend that. The criticism against the media law is countered, I think, or you counter it by two arguments. You say it's a campaign against Hungary, against you personally, and the criticism is very vague. But I'd like to say clearly for the Liberals that it's not actually a campaign. It is a genuine European issue if a member state of the European Union infringes basic freedoms and questions them. To the Commission, I'd like to say, yes, you've got to have a legal assessment and review, Mr. Barroso, Mrs. Cruz. But you're not just bean counters and legal scribblers. You're a political body and you have to act quickly. And also you say the criticism is vague. Well, Prime Minister, a few specific points, therefore. I think trying to generate hate and to spread lies about people is against the German basic law. And that should be the case there. Look at the legal protection, Article 36. That changes the conditions of the Media Council. And that's relevant, and there are many other specific cases. And I could mention several of them, but look at that. And we'll await the Commission's review as soon as possible, but then you really have to act.
Η κυρία Σαρτζεντίνη για ένα λεπτό παρακαλώ.
Thank you, Mrs. Sargentini.
Thank you. This European Parliament and the Member States are applying a double standard here. We never stop talking about civil rights and freedom of the press for countries that want to be Member States of the European Union, but the same doesn't seem to apply to countries that are already members. Are the Copenhagen criteria the holy of holies, or do they not apply to members? Member states are turning a blind eye. I'll leave you alone if you leave me alone. And in Hungary is even asking for that. It wants to be left in peace. That's a strange attitude on the part of a president of the European Union. Your job, Mr. Orban, is to lead this union, to stimulate, to encourage people, to each country to take an interest in the others. Our Parliament, this institution that is supposed to uphold Europe's values, is not doing so. If I may say so, President, it was a great pleasure to give you my opinion, my truth and my balanced reporting. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kurski, 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is very fortunate that the presidency is taken over by a government which is so much supported in its own country. And it has that support because it acts in the interest of Hungary. It contributes to the recovery after the government, the rule of socialists in that country. It is not fair to attack Hungary ideologically. These attacks are highly hypocritical, which the issue of the media law is showing. We have the same kind of law in Poland, and as a result of having a media board, many journalists are being kicked out of media organizations, and nobody's defending them. That is a fact. It is a hypocritical attack in the light of a letter against Hungary, which was signed by a representative of the Czech Republic, of the head of the Gazeta Wyborcza in Poland. This is the truth about today's attack on Hungary, which is revenge for effective conservatism that has been put into life. I wish you a very effective presidency, as effective as your government.
Thank you, Mr. Paska, for 1 minute, but please keep to that specific.
Madam Chair, distinguished Prime Minister of Hungary, on the 1st of January, the presidency of the European Union has been assumed by the Hungarian government, which was reminded to us by the so-called cultural carpet in the council building. No, I'm not talking about the map, Mr. Prime Minister. I shall mention only the kind of culture which you brought to Brussels. Precious symbols, portraits of personalities which your people are proud of, are placed under the feet of people walking through a public space. They are stepped on and smeared by people from all over Europe. Do you find it civilized? Is this supposed to be a dignified presentation of proud Hungary? I don't know what brought Hungarian diplomacy to humiliate the symbols of its own history. It could have been better placed than on the panels or walls in the same time, of the same atrium. Just take a look, Victor. Where in this hall are the symbols which we cherish and which we are proud of? They are on a respectable place. They decorate the presidency desk. I know, Mr. Prime Minister, that your country has lots of problems, but I'm convinced that the proud people of Hungary do not deserve such disrespect and no dignity for its personalities and symbols from its own government. Thank you for your attention.
Mr. Segedi, 1.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Dear colleagues, Minister, I would like to speak to you about the Hungarian presidency, even though many of the people who spoke before me are now causing me to respond. The Jobbik movement also criticised the media or the legislation on languages, but we don't totally agree on this legislation. But I've never seen so many hypocrites. Where were you Where were you, you who defend right, when we saw the introduction of the Slovak language law? Where was Mr. Cohen-Bendit, for example, when the Serb extremists acted against the Hungarians? And then when we saw the ruin of Hungarian tombstones in Romania. Jobbik always comes up with positive solutions. Yes, you've got to look at the Beneš decree. Yes, you've got to address the problem of the Slovaks. You've got to look at Romani criminality in Europe and in Hungary. Yes, you've got to look at these things. And the Hungarian government also has to look after things in domestic politics too, to keep Bernd Jurchang behind bars, who's luckily no longer in power.
Thank you, Mr. Langen. 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. President, you have two very difficult tasks here. The first of those is to overcome 8 years of socialist misrule and to put some dynamics and some stability, or dynamism and stability, back into your economy. That's a clear task that you have been given. And your second task is to lead Europe in a difficult time as its president, to do everything you can to overcome the financial and economic crisis. This Parliament and our group will support you fully in that. We're pleased to see you haven't come up with a shopping list of wishes this morning, which has tended to be the case with socialist presidencies of council the last few years, but you've set clear priorities. Thirdly, Hungary has now been a member of the European Union since 2004, and we're very pleased to see that the governing party is a member of our group. The campaign that has been conducted here in Parliament, not by you, not by the Hungarian people, since 2010 on this new Media Act with demands for withdrawal of voting rights under Article 7. The people sitting at the front over there have been going on about that, is a fraud, and couldn't be implemented. The Media Act in Hungary is comparable with many others, and Mr. Schulz has called for that withdrawal of voting rights. All I can say to him is that he seems to have forgotten all about a certain red-green coalition provincial government in North Rhineland-Westphalia, and he hasn't read their Media Act. There's no question of sanctions, or all that's in there, I'm sorry, is about sanctions, a media council, and balanced reporting, exactly what you are saying. So you have a big urge behind you. Thank you, Mr. Langen. Ms. Harms, you want to use a blue card procedure? Have you a question, Ms. Harms?
Sehr geehrter Herr Kollege Langen, ist es so, dass...
Mr. Langen, in North Rhine-Westphalia, in our Land media law, media overview is completely in the hand of one party. And the situation is that media overview in North Rhine-Westphalia for 9 years was set up 9 years ago by the government. That is a situation in North Rhine-Westphalia, and just one party decides upon rapporteurship in a balanced or unbalanced way. And I think if that's the case, I mean, the Hungarian situation is not so odd. Why does Mrs. Merkel criticise that, and also at home?
Sie geben mir sicher 5 Minuten, Frau Präsidentin. Erstens, Frau Merkel hat...
Well, first of all, Ms. Merkel asked whether the act is in line with European requirements in every respect, and Mr. Orban and asked Mr. Orban to change any provisions that weren't after the Commission had checked it. I think that's only fair and natural. Secondly, the Media Act in the North Rhineland-Westphalia, no broadcasting station can broadcast unilateral statements by a single group or a single political group or a representing a single philosophy. Paragraph 31. In other words, the Chief Minister can hand out warnings and can levy fines up to €5,000. Thank you. Mr. Langen, right. Mr. Langen. Order, please. My dear colleagues, we can't carry on like this. This has nothing to do with the Hungarian presidency. The Prime Minister will answer the points that have been raised regarding the presidency in a moment. But we can't continue like this. We have a long speakers list. And there are other speakers who have to be given the floor. Ms. Benova, 1 minute. But that's...
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
That's another debate we're talking about.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Let me return to Mr. Orban. Welcome to the European Parliament. Hungary is taking its presidency in time which is very difficult, and the programme that you have introduced to us is definitely full of great visions and aspirations. You have several times asked us, as a Parliament, we should help you to carry on with this programme and accomplish it. And let's believe it, we are here for that. We are here to support what's good in your programme and what's European in it. In your presentation, however, there has also been a call for a stronger Europe. And I have to say that I don't really understand, where does your Europeanship begin and where does it end? Where are the limits of your Europeanship? Because in other words, I cannot understand why precisely your government started its presidency and its turn by a presentation of a non-existing territory, instead of presenting as a presidency a new vision of Europe. So, Mr. Orban, I do wish that the good Europeanship in you should be developed for the better, for all of us, and also to have the positive Hungarian statesmanship in you. Thank you.
Ms. Valian.
Thank you, Chair. Well, colleagues, for already a long time our Union took the path of setting targets after targets, but no one is looking back to see if all these were achieved or properly implemented. Growth, jobs, citizen-friendly union, all these tend to become eternal objectives. Where we actually are is the point to recognise the failure of at least some of our policies and the one-fits-all solutions way too often applied. To stimulate EU's economic growth, maybe we should start thinking from outside the box and accepting the various interests and specificities of our 27 members. The Commission proposes and the Presidency endorses a mere coordination of our economic policies. This might turn into a trap for exactly the economic growth we are seeking. With solely macroeconomic and financial targets and policies, while we have an incomplete single market, red tape burdening companies and entrepreneurs, and a messy labour market, our EU growth might be that of a whale in a pool of barracudas, because this is the global market in a crisis context today. Talking about other eternal objectives presented in the presidency programme, such as achieving a common energy policy, what we need is to find common energy interests and needs of all member states, and I am not convinced that spending billions of euros in gigantic infrastructure projects is the answer. Mr. Orban is also talking about enlargement. I hope that it is not the Hungarian way of granting citizenship to all Hungarian ethnic citizens of its neighbouring countries. EU enlargement in a Eurosceptic context of economic crisis, is this realistic? For the last, I wish us all good luck. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Mr. Van Dalen has the floor next, and he has 1 minute. And I hope I don't have to interrupt you. Thank you, Madam President. The Hungarian presidency has got off to a rather unfortunate start. The Hungarian government has not shown the right example to the European Union with its new media rules. The new act gives the media authority very far-reaching powers indeed, and that has cast an unfortunate light on the Hungarian presidency. There's only one of many worrying developments in Hungary. Because of the dominance of one single political party, other voices are no longer heard. The 17th century French writer Rochefoucauld said of this, very few people are wise enough to choose constructive criticism over false praise. So my advice to the presidency is to take to heart the words of Rochefoucauld, both you and your government. Thank you.
Σας ευχαριστώ πολύ. Ο κύριος Mauro τώρα για 1,5.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mauro, 1.5 minutes.
Thank you very much indeed, President Orban, welcome to Strasbourg, where we all love Hungary, as Mr. Cohn-Bendit said. But you will understand, not everybody loves the Hungarian government. We love Hungary. We hold it in high esteem, the Hungarian government. I would say, really, we support your party. Why? Because this party was one of the determinant reasons behind Hungary, after a long and terrible dictatorship, coming back into democracy and democratic life. So we support Fidesz because over all these years it has followed the same guiding values of democracy and freedom when it was in government and also when it was in opposition. And we are supporting Fidesz because Fidesz is the genuine alternative to populist drift, which seems to be the case occurring in many European countries. And we were supporting it, promoting it, because given your priorities, Fidesz is making us understand that the battle for a united and free Europe is not yet over. Well, we're putting our trust in you, and we're supporting you, because that means supporting Hungary and the whole of Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mauro. Ms. Hertzog, you have 1.5 minutes.
Elnök úr, képviselőtársaim!
Madam President, dear colleagues, since its creation, the European Union has a main focus and a main challenge, which is to provide energy security. For a long time, we believed that it was necessary to reduce energy dependence, but the economic crisis has unequivocally shown us that access and affordable prices are more important. Last winter, many people died in Hungary because they didn't have heating in their homes. Recently, a whole building asked for the heating to be turned off because people couldn't afford to pay their bills for heating. So it's very important for us to think about energy policy. We've got old infrastructure that needs to be improved. Now, as regards the Hungarian presidency and energy policy, it's up to the Hungarians now to build the foundations of this energy solidarity, and that applies too to the networks. We mustn't build old networks, the networks of yesterday, but we need the networks of tomorrow with real investors involved. All member states have got to be working towards an improvement of energy or rather the safe storage of nuclear waste, and it's very important for us to work with a clear heart and a clear head, and then it will be possible for us to face up to the challenges and tasks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sanders. 1.5 minutes. I think it's at times like this that it's necessary to get back to the fundamental values that underpin Europe, and the first of those is the battle against all forms of nationalism. And let me tell you that I am worried about your offer of Hungarian nationality to ethnic Hungarians in other countries. You want to give them the voting rights, and that's in violation of all international conventions. The second aspect is the defence of democracy and freedom. Since you took up your post, some measures have been passed which are of concern to us, and perhaps you will give us answers on these. The powers of the Constitutional Court have been restricted. The independence of the central bank is called into question, and that is in contradiction with the accession treaty. And you've had a law voted through on the media which claims to be domestication of European legislation, which is in fact a law that will destroy the freedom of the press, as has been shown recently. You explained that your act is like those of other member states too. But even if some people, and I'm thinking in particular of my own country, could still make some progress, that's very obvious. Which other country in the EU can levy fines of 700,000 euros on the media for moral considerations. So the issue is now being examined by the Commission on the substance and the legal aspects. But apart from the legal aspects, if this is an act that destroys freedom of expression or encroaches on freedom of expression, then we will expect very firm action from Europe. Thank you. Mr. Odi, also 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, President, Prime Minister. Hungary is a European country. It likes the European Parliament, and it's chosen as President of the Republic one of our wonderful colleagues, Paul Schmidt. And you had the wisdom to choose as Minister Madame Gauhy, an ex-colleague of ours, and I welcome that. I welcome her. Now, democracy works. You were elected. Good. Europe works. One law is something which is criticised. You said, by way of response, I'll change it. People say you don't have problems with your values, but then you talk about the old communist constitution, but you will take over the charter now as a whole, and that's good. That shows that we're in Europe, a political Europe. That's good news. Now, politically, you met the challenges, and economically, you are changing the structure of the economy, and you're in the seat at the right time. It's not the first time. You already were in 1988, the right man for the time when you were Prime Minister then. Now, come back to Croatia. You want accession? We are in favour of it. But note that some people or factors of European public opinion are wary about this. I think you should start a major communication campaign to prove to European citizens tangibly that Croatia fulfills all accession criteria, because we're no longer looking at things in terms of en bloc accession post-Berlin Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Odi, and you stuck exactly to your speaking time. Mr. Lopez Aguilar, one.
Madam President, Prime Minister, on behalf of the Spanish Socialists, I would like to greet the Hungarian presidency, the third presidency of the first trio of presidencies that inaugurated the new dynamic that was set out in the Lisbon Treaty. This needs consistency with the common manuscript then that has been set out by Belgium and Hungary and Spain, and of course, or rather Belgium, Hungary and Spain, but we also need to make sure that we are heading towards the key priorities. The second article of the Lisbon Treaty sets out common values and principles: the respect for rights, the protection of minorities, and the right to freedom of expression. And therefore I express concern about this. The Hungarian presidency are very important, but you might see a conflict in terms of what's happening back home. The media law in Hungary shouldn't be a focus of attention regarding the implementation of the audiovisual services. It shouldn't be part of that debate. But this is something that doesn't just affect the single market or Hungary. It actually affects the common values and rights of the whole of the European Union. So we will only come out of this crisis with better integration, not by strengthening national cooperatives. So the Hungarian presidency now has an opportunity to show leadership when it comes to implementing the values of the Lisbon Treaty, and you've got to work towards that. Thank you.
Mr. Vidal Quadras, a blue card, a question to Mr. Lopez Aguilar. You have half a minute.
I listened very carefully to the words of Mr. Lopez Aguilar, and I just want to remind him that at the moment the government in Spain, the socialist Spanish government, is preparing the creation of a state media council and a law against discrimination and unfair treatment, which I think will set a Damocles sword above the political opponent of the Spanish government or anybody who wishes to intervene using the media. So, Mr. Lopez Aguilar, before you point the finger at everybody else, and I don't want to go into the detail of the media law in Hungary, do you not think, though, it would be a good idea just to be fair and go home and see what's happening in Spain first? You, as Minister of Justice, won't forget this, I'm sure.
Mr. Lopez Aguilar, you have a right to answer. You have half a minute.
It's not the first time we've heard comparisons which are totally irrelevant between a law which has given rise to concern in Europe and something else. With due respect to you and your group, laws which respect freedoms and freedom of expression in a pluralist society and pluralist free information and audiovisual laws in Spain, which are totally different, nothing to do with the sort of audiovisual ones elsewhere. And I think it's unfair to compare them. That goes for Spain and other places which have been dragged into this concerned discussion.
Thank you very much, my dear colleagues. Please stick to your speaking time and stick to the subject of the day, the Hungarian President, Mr. Saryusz-Wolski.
Prime Minister, the Presidency has a unique opportunity to put into practice energy security for Europe. There will be two subsequent presidencies with a strong political will, Hungarian and Polish one, to use all the possibilities which are at hand. So far, we face consolidation of monopoly of supply and transit, lack of interconnected single market and special vulnerability of the eastern flank of the Union. What we do expect from the Hungarian Presidency is to put into work the geometry of union in the form of a triangle. North South Baltic Adriatic axis or corridor with LNG ports in Poland and Croatia completed by Caspian gas supplying directly, separately and independently the European Union from Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan at the beginning. And this southern corridor should include obviously the Nabucco project. So a new source of energy security for Europe is an ultimate challenge for your presidency. And the three imperative aims are to build interconnectors, to assure adequate funding and finally to boost the external dimension of EU energy policy, because energy is a public good for the Union. It needs to be Europeanised. It has to be based on solidarity, and your political will should guarantee that to be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Wilmot, 1 minute.
Thanks very much, President. At a time when we should be discussing issues of economic governance, employment rights and the environment, all high on our agenda, at a time when we should be celebrating this fantastic achievement of Hungary, who for the first time has the honour of the presidency, it saddens me that the Hungarian people who have fought so long, stood up against oppression, who have fought for so long for democracy, now have that democracy challenged by these new media laws in Hungary and the protectionist policies used to attack foreign companies, casting a shadow on what should be a proud period for the Hungarian people. This is a critical time for our citizens and we must carry on with our programme of reform. However, we must also be vigilant to ensure that Europe does not slip back into the dark days of the past. We must continue to oppose and highlight any forms of state censorship and protectionist policies. We must reach out to the Hungarian people, but our future democracy cannot be compromised.
Thank you very much. You stuck to your speaking time as well. Ms. Jaroka, 1.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Prime Minister. The European Parliament was the first to set the objective of the Rome strategy in Europe at the beginning of 2008, and for 3 years now many documents have been signed and set out the importance of this challenge and the poverty that affects 12 million European Roma. As a Fidesz MEP and the only Roma community member here, I am very happy that the Hungarian presidency is the first in the member states to fully get to grips with coming up with a strategy to deal with one of the major human rights problems in the European Union. This is something we have to deal with, and as European rapporteur for this, I would have liked to have seen the Commission respond to this, and subsequently to that I hope that the Hungarian presidency will come up with a strategy for this, and that the target groups will be assessed in terms of economic and not ethical grounds, and I hope that we'll be getting to grips with human rights and strengthen the implementation of the Equal Opportunities Directive. Now, this process is more than just a European strategy for Roma. It's about mutual trust and whether or not the European Union is going to be able to create the community of values and overcome these complex challenges. I really wish you the best.
Thank you very much. Mr. Leichtfried, now 1 minute. Thank you, Madam President, my dear colleagues. There is no requirement that the press be balanced in Europe. We have freedom of the press. And when you have a body set up in Europe to determine whether or not reporting is balanced and then can punish people it thinks are not being balanced in their reporting, then I would say that we should have some reaction from the guardians of European law, the Commission, but not a half-hearted and delayed reaction, a rapid and effective reaction, and that's not what we're getting. Mr. Orban, your aggressive defence of your friends has certainly not convinced me. You're supposed to be a liberal. That's something I'm always comfortable with, but I'd like to ask you, how do you feel now when you seem to be taking a country away from democracy on the path to totalitarianism? How do you feel where someone who has to be defended by those people up there? Thank you. A bit of order, please. Mr. Rangel, 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I'd just like to say that this Parliament, when we're discussing the Hungarian presidency, we should be looking at all the issues, but not be vague, focus on all the issues with relevance to the European Union. And we've got to closely look at and see whether we agree with the priorities of the Hungarian presidency or not, rather than looking at points and aspects which are really pertaining outside our remit to the internal life of Hungary, which a matter there which can be settled with a decent agreement between the Commission and the Hungarian government. I'd like also to say that above and beyond priorities, which obviously the Hungarian presidency has, and it will be looking at economics and financial issues, those are very high up the agenda. But I think above and beyond that, I'm very happy to see that we've had a very lucid and ambitious agenda in general put forward for this half. And I think there are 3 areas of priority which will be crucial for the future of Europe. And you mentioned those, that food, that's in serious world crisis, energy, which is essential for our security and our economic sustainable growth, and water. People have not mentioned water much, but along with food, it's very important, an upcoming challenge for the Europeans. I wish you all success.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rangel. Mr. Vigenin, 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam in the Chair. Mr. Prime Minister, in 2011, the first time 2 countries of Central and Eastern Europe will lead the European Union, Poland and Hungary. These 2 countries have their own contribution to democracy in Europe, and I think we should not waste this capital. Today we show that we can waste this capital. Mr. Prime Minister, get rid of this shadow cast over your presidency so that we can congratulate you on fulfilling your priorities. It is good to concentrate on fulfilled priorities than on things that cast shadows. You will have our support on Croatia, but I didn't hear anything about your neighborhood policy. I believe that you will take the necessary initiative, and I believe that within the term of office that you have, you will be able to restore in some way the democratic development in Belarus. I don't believe that Mr. Orban can be compared to Mr. Chavez. There are other examples in Europe that can compete in this respect.
Thank you. Mr. Strasser, 1.5 minutes. Mr. Orban, your country has had to suffer a great deal, and you yourself and your party, as well as your country, can feel satisfied that you have contributed a great deal to the development of Europe, and a good neighbour like Austria should acknowledge that at this historic time. You have created security, or you are want to create security, growth and jobs, and now those are priorities of your presidency, and we can only support them. Energy policy, the internal market, those are important. Danube strategy too, and of course the completion of talks with Croatia. That's something that we would like to support, and we will support it. I'd like to thank you more particularly for your standing up for freedom of worship. Yes, Christianity is one of the pillars of European action and European thought, and we have every respect for the fact that you have reformed the communist Media Act in Hungary, which dates from 1968. So we have. I don't think all we've heard on this subject in this room today is right. All these references to sanctions which were taken in the year 2000 against the Austrian government, those have been shown to be wrong, and it would be exactly the same thing if they were applied to you. I'd like to thank you for doing that, and I wish every success to your presidency. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Boștinaru. 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Madam President. President in Office of Council, Prime Minister Orban, dear colleagues, as a European citizen, as a socialist, I would like to welcome your commitment to a strategy on the Danube region, a coherent strategy for the Roma as well at European level, and as a Romanian citizen, I welcome your intention to ensure that Romania and Bulgaria join the Schengen area. However, I do see that the Hungarian presidency is struggling a little bit, precisely because of the media law debate. It seems that this debate has been drafted under the political influence of Orti, Ceausescu, Antonescu. You might even say that this law could damage the credibility, the prestige of Hungary as a member state of the European Union, and also put in peril the credibility of the Hungarian nation. Now, this piece of legislation has been criticised by two big governments in the European Union, that is the German and the French governments, and they are actually part of your political family. Other members of the European Parliament have also criticised this bill, and I think this is something that we cannot accept. We cannot move in this direction.
Thank you very much, Mr. van der Kamp. 1.5 minutes. Madam President, thank you very much. As a result of the debate on the Media Act in Hungary, everybody in Europe now knows that Hungary is holding the presidency of the European Union. Things haven't always been that way. I think it's a good thing that the Prime Minister has explained this act or submitted it to the Commission, and I have every faith in their judgment and I await it eagerly. Then there's the 4 priorities of the Hungarian presidency. Growth, jobs. Well, first and foremost, President, the administrative burden on small and medium-sized businesses. What are you going to do in practical terms about that? The digital agenda. China isn't going to wait for Europe. And then the second priority is a stronger Europe. At the moment, President, the water is right up to our necks here in Europe. We're not talking about the rising sea waters, but the water in the rivers, the Rhine, the Po and the Moselle, and that too is something you should be looking at. Then closer to our citizens, citizen-friendly. What are we going to do with Schengen, Romania and Bulgaria, and the accession of Croatia? Lastly, President. Hungary has levied a crisis tax on non-Hungarian businesses. That's in violation of the internal market. When are you going to get rid of it? Thank you.
Speech. Colleagues, we are going to the catch the eye procedure. I have more than 20 requests on the list, and I can take only 5 of you because we are rather late, as you know. Mr. Laszlo Tokes, 1 minute, please.
Tisztelt elnök úr, a médiatörvény vonatkozásában hadd éljek a
Thank you. On the media law in Hungary, I'd like to make a historical political comparison here. In 56, the majority of the Western Communist parties and a lot of intellectuals on the left and liberal side accused the Hungarian revolutionaries and actually defended the Soviet Bolsheviks. Mutatis mutandis, things are pretty similar now. A lot of our socialist and liberal colleagues in the West are participating the same way to support the communists, force liberals, Centaliojev, and against Mr. Viktor Orban and his supporters. And they're using as a battleground this law on the media. So let's make sure that the champions of the past are not mixed up with the post-communists and the left. Albert Camus should have noted at the time that he was wrong and should have noted the real Stalinists.
1 minute.
Mr. President. Prime Minister, I agree with you on 3 points. First of all, on Croatia. There we're on the same wavelength, and I hope that you and your Foreign Minister can resolve it. Secondly, on the importance of integration of the Roma, and thirdly, on the European significance of the Hungarian Revolution. I was born in Austria on the Hungarian border. I've lived through the good times there. We've had school exchanges with Hungary, but we're against this demand for the Hungarian Revolution was against. It was for freedom. It was against monopoly on power, or a demand for a monopoly on power, and the Media Act is not in line with that. It's not in line with the spirit of the Hungarian revolution, and if you could try to make it more compatible with that spirit, then you would have a better piece of legislation, a better Media Act that would contain the very spirit of that Hungarian revolution.
Mr. Ivo Weigl, 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. Rad bi spregovoril nekaj besed ohrabritve in podpore madžarskemu predsedstvu kot državi, ki je naša dobra soseda, s katero nas veže veliko skupnega, in lahko mi je podpreti glavne prioritete, ki ste jih, gospod premier, danes za svoje predsedstvo orisali.
Thank you, President. I wish you all the best for the time in your presidency and telling us what you intend to do. I think Hungary can do a lot to defend the values we all subscribe to, and make sure that they implement these values now and in the future. That's something which perhaps you didn't really want to hear, but if you look backwards in history, you've got to make sure that we don't just incite colleagues to be irritated. You've got to learn to live with your own history.
Madam Emilia Turunen.
Ja, tak for ordet. Tillad mig at kommentere på en...
Thank you very much. I'd just like to make a comment on a point which was discussed this morning, the media law in Hungary. Mr. Orban, it's not just about Hungary or domestic Hungarian politics. We're actually talking about fundamental rights in the European Union and our credibility vis-à-vis the outside world, and indeed the credibility of the press. Respect will only prevail if we adopt laws which respect the freedoms that should be in place. I am part of a generation for which freedom of the press is or goes without saying, and this law is running counter to the treaties and European legislation. So it's important to revise this law now. You have to do that with respect for people who fought for fundamental rights and for us to be able to keep the media as we know them today. I believe in democracy and I don't want it to be unravelled. Thank you.
Mr. Othmar Karas, 1 minute.
Thank you, President. Strengthening Europe also means strengthening the Commission. It means building up a firewall of protection in financial terms and in substantive terms too. It means that democracy in Europe has to be strengthened as well, a community Europe. Strengthening Europe starts in our own backyard. Please help us to Europeanise our internal policy, not allow nationalism to flourish in Europe. If you want to strengthen Europe, Mr. President in office, then you have to reduce our shared weaknesses and stress our strengths. These are our shared values, our shared freedoms, our community method, our internal market, and it's our 4 freedoms, and of course our common currency. Parties are merely the instruments of democracy, not the other way around. Our weaknesses are nationalism, selfishness and protectionism and polarisation. Let's have a Europe that really is stronger. Let's make it, and that means a community Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President of the European Commission. Please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, honourable members of the Parliament, dear Prime Minister Orbán. At first I would like to thank you for the presentation of a very ambitious programme, and I also would like to thank the members of the House for a lovely debate and intense exchange of views, because I think that democratic debate is the best way how we can find the best solutions for Europe. And there is, though, one condition, and the condition is that the interlocutors must have a common goal. And I believe that we have it, because most of us in this House want stronger Europe. Therefore, the motto chosen by the Hungarian presidency is a very appropriate and very right one. And therefore, on behalf of the Commission, I would like to underline that we must support goals of the Hungarian presidency. And as we could see from the debate, there is a tall order for this semester. We have to introduce economic governance. We have to find the solutions for the sovereign debt crisis. We have to make much faster the implementation of the EU 2020 strategy, just to name a few from the economic field. But we very much welcome the focus of the Hungarian presidency on looking for a better solution if it comes to the integration of Roma, if it comes to the focus on the Danube strategy. If you allow me to comment on the issue of how to integrate better Roma in the European Union. You know very well that we engaged in a very wide programme on how to raise awareness and promote coordinated dialogue in the Member States on opportunities offered by EU funds. After Hungary in 2009 and in Romania in 2010, Slovakia and Bulgaria will be in the focus in this year. And I believe that together with you and with the Hungarian presidency we will be able to deliver in April the new EU framework for the national Roma integration strategies. If you allow me to remark to the remark of Mr. Cohn-Bendit, because I found that it is very important that on these days we clearly demonstrate that the EU stands by Tunisia and its people. And I would like in particular to pay tribute for the courage that all Tunisians have shown in the recent days. And the EU, I am sure, will stand side by side with Tunisians as they pursue their peaceful and democratic aspiration. The new unity government should truly represent the wishes of the Tunisian society, and it should conduct the country through a peaceful and democratic transition and organise yearly elections. And I would like to assure this Parliament that we stand ready to provide immediate assistance, to prepare and organise an electoral process and lasting support to a genuine democratic transition, and if requested, We are also prepared to deploy the necessary assistance to help the Tunisian authorities with urgent needs. To answer the calls for swift actions from the side of the Commission on media law, I would like to inform
Mr. Vice President, a moment. Colleagues, please stop the discussion in the hall. Colleagues, please stop all the discussions in the hall, because it's impossible to listen to the speaker. Colleagues, please take your seat and stop discussing in the hall. Mr. Vice President.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. To come back to my remarks, I would like to answer to the calls for the swift action from the side of the Commission on media law. And I would like to inform the honourable members that the discussion with the Hungarian authorities on political and expert level is intense and ongoing. And the Commission will send a clarification letter to Budapest already this week, where we would seek further explanations. So I just would like to underline once again that we are acting in a very swift manner, taking into account the complexity of the issue, and I have to also repeat what President Barroso said, that we are very much encouraged by the political commitment of Prime Minister Orban to correct the law if necessary. And we are fully confident that Hungary will take all necessary steps to ensure that the new media law is implemented in full respect of the European values on media freedom and relevant EU legislation, as well as the European Convention on Human Rights. And in this respect, of course, the Commission will act fully in accordance with its role as a guardian of the treaties. Mr. President, if you allow me to conclude by expressing that we have full trust in the commitment and enthusiasm of the Hungarian presidency. We have seen the solid preparation for this task, and from the Hungarian authorities to be very energetic presidency for this very important semester. And we believe that together we can further the European project, and I am sure that the European Parliament will support this work and will play its role in the spirit of loyal cooperation, because we clearly need very solid advancement on our top priorities in this semester. So allow me to conclude by wishing the Presidency all the best for the next 6 months, and we are looking forward to work together for the benefit of Europe. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you very much for your speech, Mr. Vice President of the European Commission, Maroš Šefčovič. Mr. Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, the floor is yours.
Mélyen tisztelt elnök úr, először is szeretnék köszönetet mondani a...
President, members, first of all I'd like to thank all members who have been so good as to contribute to this debate. It's a very interesting debate, and one full of many interesting aspects. And there were so many interesting aspects that I can't really reply to everything, including the 1-minute speeches. But I'll have to try and focus in and reply to certain ideas which were put forward. First of all, with my Hungarian Prime Minister's hat on, let me say how surprised I am that so many very serious ladies and gentlemen, respected personages, have actually thought it worth taking the floor, but basing themselves on mistakes. I think that would be unworthy, not just of myself, but also of you, to actually go through all the mistakes which were actually made with respect to democracy in Hungary and the media law. I'll just give you an example, though, to illustrate what the mistakes are. In the Hungarian media law, there's no sanction foreseen and no fine foreseen for unbalanced reporting, put it that way. But there are many other examples which I could refer to. And it's a pity that you are perhaps misled or all along the wrong track in this discussion. And I can clearly see that it's very difficult for me to get fair treatment in the terms of this debate. But I do put my faith in the Commission, who I hope will come to a solution for this problem, a solution which I will accept, and I will take measures, as already mentioned. And I think we have to do some real thinking about what Mr. Schulz said. It's not on the basis of the programme, but actually what we do, our performance, where you will gauge us as a Hungarian government. And I think the same principle should go to the media law, which has been in effect for the last 2 weeks. I'm ready to send you on articles and media reports, and you can conclude that the eloquent words of Mr. Cohn-Bendit are very innocent compared to a lot of the criticism which has been levelled against us in the articles I'll send you, say, from the German press. All sorts of huge accusations have been moved against us, but look at us on the facts. You've been living in an information society, you live in a current information society, where you can see the internet coming under oppression. We won our elections on the basis of a freedom flag. How do you think we'll be able, on that basis, to stop the free flow of information? We live in this current century, the 21st century. And the law concerning the media, which you criticise so strongly, is replacing a law dating back to 1986, which was adopted within the communist system at the time. And then it was possible just to delete newspapers and media vectors from a register if you didn't like people, if you thought that people had spoken against you. So I think let's get our feet back on the ground. Let's be aware of reality and speak informed by the spirit of reason. Just look at the facts. Many opinions have been raised here, but I can actually confirm to you that the rule of law in Hungary is currently being reconstructed. You may have had discussions in your own parliament recently saying that the secret services have been used in an abusive way in Hungary, that the police has intervened to stop demonstrations, and legal cases and procedures are underway linked to all this. But measures were undertaken under the previous government which did squarely go against democracy and the rule of law. And I got the impression that for you, it was different. It's not really the law concerning the media which bothers some of you, but the fact that the Hungarian government has got together, or the Hungarian people got together and voted through a new government with a 2/3 majority. Maybe that's the thing which bothers some of you. And I will obviously use this majority to do the necessary for the European Union. Mr. Graf Lambsdorff, you made a personal comment there. I'm speaking to you as a European, as a Hungarian. Your law on the media is no longer democratic. And I certainly don't think it's more than ours. If you contest that, please put it in writing. I don't think your accusation is well conceived there. We lived, remember, under dictatorship for 40 years, And I will not stand for you contesting the democratic aspirations of the Hungarians.
A médiatörvényt természetesen lehet.
The law on media obviously can and should be criticised. And I think that's just the normal course of things. Speaker stops. You cannot just go about wounding and offending people in this way. It's an offence against the Hungarian people.
What, at the end? At the end.
És engedjék meg, hogy utaljak arra a hozzászólásra, amely az...
And allow me to refer also to what's been said by people who have accused Hungary of taking steps towards dictatorship. I heard what you said. You threatened our country. You're saying that we're taking steps towards dictatorship. What is that other than an offence, a slap in the face of the Hungarian people? I will always defend my people. I will always defend my country. It's not a question just of a media bill or a media law. As for European issues, I will now put on my European hat, if you'll allow me to. I think that it's important that we talk about the bond market. Mr. Verhofstadt mentioned that. And I would say to you that setting up a bond market is considered to be necessary in the long term, inevitable for the Hungarian presidency. And European policies which lead Hungary and other member states of the European Union into the Eurozone will also be supported. That's another thing. We support those policies. But also note that we have to persuade our national governments that a Eurobond market should not be used to save on structural reforms and not do those. So first of all, we've got to have our structural reforms and then immediately ensuing set up, or it will be possible to set up a bond market. Now, Tunisia. I'll be so bold as to say to you that we are in ongoing talks with diplomatic representations there, and we support all the democratic aspirations and hopes above and, well, outside of European borders. So we support them anywhere. And I would like to say, without being misunderstood, and quite clearly, that this should not be confused with the fight against oppression of Christians throughout the world. Persecution of Christians has to be stopped, but they are two distinct issues. So maybe this is a stormy start to Hungarian presidency. I hope it doesn't have a bad effect or cast a shadow over the term of our presidency. I'd like to say, well, whether it does or not will depend basically on you. I and we are ready to carry out the two debates, the Hungarian and the European debates, on two levels, if you like, and follow them on two levels. If you want to have an Hungarian debate and a European debate at the same time, well, we're ready to meet you for that too, and have it that way. We do not feel that this situation should be uncomfortable, though. We shouldn't be worried by it. In fact, we're very happy to see that both sides are going to be discussed. But we don't really want our internal affairs to be mixed with European matters, but we're ready to do so if you wish to debate it in those terms. Never thought that Hungarian presidency would be comparable to a fashion show or a regatta where you always get applauded at the end of a particular queue of wonderful things. We're always ready to debate all topics you deem important, always. Hungary will give the necessary weight and focus to discussions on Hungarian issues, yes, and on European issues, yes too. And no attack against the Hungarian situation will deflect our attention from European priorities. We'll give the just focus and we hope we'll succeed.
Dziękuję, panie premierze, za przemówienie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. Now, ladies and gentlemen.
Dziękuję panu premierowi.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for your presentation. And according to our rules, at the end of a debate, we may have personal statements. And Mr. Schulz requested an opportunity to make one.
Koleżanki i koledzy, postępujemy zgodnie.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are following the rules of procedure.
Thank you very much, President, and thank you for giving me the floor for a personal statement. Prime Minister and President in office, you mentioned me by name and other colleagues as well. Now, may I draw your attention to statements made by the Hungarian people whom you are representing here, the statements you've made. We're setting off on the journey of the next 6 months. Mr. Cohn-Bendit told you from his own background, his links to the Hungarian people. In my group, we have members who have who have been in communist jails. We have one member, Miguel Angel Martinez, who was tortured in Spain for being a dissident under the Franco regime. All of us together, all of us here, we have a shared task, and that is to defend democracy against these people who are heckling us now, for example, people like that. We're not insulting the Hungarian people by criticising an act of parliament. You can count on one thing: the left of this House, all of it, and in my group in particular, we say this to you. Freedom, democracy and justice are part of our society, and we don't think that your Media Act abides by them. That's a criticism of the Media Act when we say that, not of the Hungarian people. And if we both take that on board, Mr. Orban, something will happen that you need and we need as well. We won't make a success of Europe if we split. All the member states in their sovereignty and the Union in its, as a community, work together. If they don't do that, Europe will not succeed. Don't play one side off against the other. Over the next 6 months, you're wearing one hat, the hat of the President in Office of Council, and we want you to help defend Europe with us and not play Hungary against the Union. Thank you.
Mr. Prime Minister, you want? Well, thank you very much for your speech, for your presence. Personal statement as well. Okay.
Mes chers collègues,
Dear colleagues, There are moments in history, and this applies in all languages, there are moments in history where you should not cross a certain line. Mr. Orban, you are proud of the Hungarian people, and you're right to be proud. But democracy says one thing very clearly for all theoreticians or theorists of democracy. The truth is not always on the side of the majority. The truth is not always on the side of the majority.
Mr. President Cohn-Bendit, moment. It is personal statement necessary.
Comments off microphone.
Gueule là-haut, oui ou non? Hein? Quand il prétend ici.
When he claims, Mr. Orban, you're galvanizing the extreme right in this. But when Mr. Orban claims here that we have said something against the Hungarian people, then it's actually national populism. It's about not being able to discuss the content of something and actually have a proper debate. It's pitching people against each other.
Vous nous avez invités.
Mr. Orban, you invited us to dine with you, but actually we've lost our appetite now. We don't want to dine with you at all.
Very much. Dear colleagues, well, colleagues, it is the end of our debate. It is an end of our debate. Well, point of order. And the end of the debate could be a point of order. Yeah.
It is. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I rise to speak under the same rule, whichever the one Mr. Cohn-Bendit just used. I would like to know, you are far more expert in the rules of procedure I am, sir, so I'd like some enlightenment. The only rule that I can see on personal statements was 151, which says that the Speaker must confine themselves to statements made about themselves. Under what rule is Mr. Schulz allowed to give a speech? Under what rule is Mr. Cohn-Bendit allowed to give a speech in these circumstances? Are all MEPs equal, or are some MEPs more equal than others? Thank you.
Proszę Państwa.
Ladies and gentlemen, Prime Minister Orban addressed Mr. Schulz, indeed, directly, with the reservation that this may offend the Hungarian nation. And we have made our explanations, we have seen our clarifications. Now, this was a very important statement by the Hungarian presidency. Let us respect it. We have adopted the program of the presidency. We've approved it. We have heard very positive opinions about what the Hungarians will do in the coming 6 months. It's essential for all of us. Let us accept it now and let us put an end to the debate. This was a very important debate, and I gave the floor to the people who requested a personal statement in accordance with the rules of procedure. And I would like to thank Mr. Prime Minister for his statement, for his presence.
Mr. Prime Minister, for your presentation. Thank you very much. It's the end of the debate. Okay.
The President.